My bad. Good evening and welcome to our virtual Committee of Adjustment meeting. On your screen, you'll see members of our Committee of Adjustment. Now, behind the scenes, we have many staff members with us this evening, and even though you won't see them, you will hear them chime in from time to time. Our Secretary Treasurer is Lindsay Stamen, and our Clerk is Elizabeth Fawcett, who will be hosting the meeting and running the Zoom platform from behind the scenes. Now, the agenda and the schedules for this meeting have been posted on Dash on the city's website. And if you don't have those documents and you'd like to follow along, you might want to access them now. So we have 10 agenda items this evening, and I'd like to share with you the format that I'm going to be using to navigate through each application. I'm going to start by introducing an application, and then I'll invite the applicant or their agent to add anything further. If you are the applicant or the agent and you have nothing further to add, then simply say so. Next, I'll invite members of the committee to ask questions of the applicant or staff, and then I'll open the public portion of the meeting. At that time, I'm going to invite members of the public to raise their virtual hand in Zoom only if they have questions or comments in respect of the application. Now, if you do have a question or you wish to make a comment, please don't expect an immediate answer because it's during this public portion of the meeting that we will be recording your questions and comments, and only after I close the public portion of the meeting will the questions and comments be addressed. Now, next, I'll invite the applicant or staff to address the public comments, after which I'll come back to the committee, have them make a motion, and then we'll deliberate on the application. At that time, if you're the applicant, you're free to leave the meeting. Now, I'll be using the same format for each application this evening. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Now, if you have a personal interest in any particular application and you'd like to receive written notice of tonight's decision, then please send an email with your name and address to our Secretary Treasurer, Lindsay Stamen. Her email address is lsthamann@cityofkingston.ca. So now I'll call the meeting to order at 5:32 p.m. and I'll refer you to the agenda. So committee members, can I call for a motion to approve the agenda? So moved by Greg and seconded by Vincent. And any discussion on that? So all in favor, raise your hand. And that would be carried. I just want to confirm that we have a quorum this evening. I see there are just 3 of us. Elizabeth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do have quorum. Quorum counts as 3 members of committee for Committee of Adjustment.
Very good. Thanks very much. Okay, so that one is carried for the agenda. All right, so next is the confirmation of the minutes of the April 19th meeting. So we've all had a chance to review them, and I call for a motion to approve it, moved by Vincent, seconded by Greg. Any discussion on that? So all in favor, raise your hand, and that would be unanimously carried. All right, thanks very much. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Good, because that would be a problem. So that's that's good. We have no delegations and there are no requests for deferral for this evening, and we have no returning deferred items. That was number 7 on the agenda. So number 8 on the agenda, the first agenda item for this evening is 8A, which is an application for minor variance. And Lindsay, can I have you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Our first application tonight is for a minor variance at 2 Dale Street. The file number associated with the application is D13022-2021. Steve Chu is the city planner on this file, and I will turn it over to him now for a brief presentation.
Very good. Thank you.
Just check my audio.
Yes, hear you fine, Stephen. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this is a minor variance application. The purpose of the minor variance is to reduce the exterior side lot requirement by 11 feet. The purpose of that variance is to allow the construction of a 2nd-story bedroom and attached ensuite bathroom over the existing garage. It is part of a larger project to add an entire 2nd floor over the existing household. However, the Sorry, it is to add a second floor addition entirely over the second floor. The only portion that requires a minor variance is over the existing garage for this 11 feet, which is too close. It is an existing garage that was built in 1967, which was prior to the existing zoning bylaw, and it's the garage's location is a permitted non-conforming use. And the applicant is trying to utilize the existing foundation to construct over the, make the best use of the existing foundation. Okay, the next slide shows the key plan. As you can see, Dale Street is on the bottom. It's the south side. There are single-family dwellings abutting the property and across the street from it. To the east is actually industrial lands, including the city's water purification plant and the Invista Center. Next slide, please. These are the details of the particular minor variance. The original requirement is 20 feet. The existing garage is 8 feet 8 inches, and it requires reduction of 11 feet 4 inches. Next slide, please. This is the site plan, and on the right side it shows Sunny Acres, and the bottom side it shows Dale Street. And basically this shows the proposed footprint of the building, and it is expanded slightly to the front of the house where the L-shaped notch is. The remainder of the house is existing position. No other variance aside from the right-hand side over where it identifies the proposed minor variance. That's the only part that requires the minor variance. Next slide, please. It's the floor plan, the existing floor plan. It's a bungalow now. And the next floor plan, the proposed second story. It's all bedrooms. It's 5 bedrooms, and the master suite is on the right side with the bedroom and the bathroom on the ensuite side. Should be noted that the privacy side is that abuts the neighbor to the north. That's where the bathroom is, and that's where the smaller windows and the privacy windows from the bathroom are. Next slide, please. Just the existing basement plan. The next slide. This is the south elevation. This is the front of the house, and it shows the proposed second story, and the slightly shaded in area on the right-hand side. And between the two lines shows the extent of the minor variance requested. Next slide. This is the elevation to the west. It would face the neighbor on Dale Street. Next slide. To the north, and this would be the neighbor to the abutting, which we would call the rear yard. Next slide. And this would be the elevation facing the street and the industrial lands across Sunny Acres roads. Next slide. I haven't had any public presentations by email, phone, or any other representation unless there's something at this meeting. Next slide. Our review of it found that the minor variance requested is minor. It's appropriate and desirable development, and it maintains the purpose and intent of the zoning bylaw and the official plan. We've made recommendations. These are minimal recommendations. They are restricted to the drawings that the applicants proposed for, that the site grading won't cause any drainage or changes to the grading, drainage for the neighbors. We don't expect it to because it's using the same footprint. And there's some cautionary notes from the building permit application itself. There are no other recommended conditions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thanks very much for that. All right. So I'm going to ask the applicant to identify themselves, or their agent identify themselves by name and address for the record, please. Oh, you might be on mute.
Great.
Welcome to the
My
club.
name is Chris Brzonka. I currently live at 555 Monterey Court. I'm currently wanting to do the minor variance on the house, bring my children or my grandchildren, pardon me, back down into the neighborhood as they do attend Sinclair. And from speaking with the neighbors, they seem to have no issues with me moving forward with this project.
Okay, very good. Thanks for that. All right, so I'll turn it over to the committee and ask committee members if you have any questions of either the applicant or staff. No, I don't have any. I reviewed it and I found it was very straightforward. So at this point, I'll open up the public portion of the meeting. Is anybody here with us this evening to speak to the application for 2 Dale Street in Kingston? Please raise your virtual hand in Zoom. I'm only seeing 2 people in the attendees, but I'll call a second time. Is anybody here this evening to speak to the application for 2 Dale Street? Please make yourself known. Raise your virtual hand in Zoom. And third and final call. Oh, I do see one. Mr. Durant, Chris Durant. Yeah, if you could just identify yourself by name and phone number, please. We're recognizing you, but I'm not seeing. Yeah, we do have a hand raised by Chris Durant. Are you able to bring him into from the attendees or as a panelist?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm just going to try that right now and see if
Okay.
that will help.
Okay, thanks. Oh, he seems to have left the room. Oh, no, he's gone from one room to another. We should be able to hear you, Mr. Durant. No, we don't have any volume. We can see the mic moving, but we don't have any audio on you. No, I'm sorry, Mr. Durant. We're just not able to hear you at this time. Do we have a different way to bring him into the meeting?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I might suggest is if Mr. Durant wished to.
Testing 1, 2.
Oh, there we go.
Yep.
Perfect.
We hear you. Yes. You keep fading in and out as though you're on a bad cell connection. Almost sounds musical, but no, if you can hear me, you just keep fading out as though you're on a bad cell connection. We can see you. No, there's no audio at all, Mr. Durant. I can just hear little clips of static.
Mr. Chair, I'm just going to perhaps, if I can just turn off Mr. Durant's video here, perhaps that might help with the audio.
Yeah.
Mr. Durant, do you want to try again?
Testing 1. I can see myself on the screen.
We can kind of hear you about 60%.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure if there's any problems technically. Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
A bit louder or clearer on my end?
So it's more steady. It's more steady at this point. Whatever you're doing now seems to be working.
Okay, I'm not doing anything different.
No, Mr. Durant, I received none of that. Elizabeth, are you able to provide Chris with a telephone number that he can call in on?
Yes, I can, Mr. Chair. If I can just have a brief second to.
Mr. Durant, we're just going to get a phone number for you to be able to use a landline to dial in.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, just because there's seems there's a couple of extra numbers here. I just want to make sure that Mr. Durant can hear me properly before I read them out. Mr. Durant,
Yeah.
can you can hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you can call the phone number, it is 1-647-374-4685. Again, that's 647-374-4685. And then I'm going to give you a second number that you will be required to enter when you call in.
Okay.
Okay, that number is
Okay.
926-0688.
Yeah.
0115. Again, that's 926-0688-0115.
Okay.
That is the meeting ID.
And Elizabeth, maybe if you could just mute his, the mic he's on right now, just so we don't get double audio. Good, thank you. Great, I see him showing up. Okay.
Hey, sorry, Mr. Durant, I'm just going to mute you on your computer.
Okay, yep.
Perfect, now we can hear you.
We can hear you
Okay.
fine.
Yep.
Yeah, so go ahead, Mr. Durant.
Yeah, no, thanks for trying to help out technically there. And I do live in the neighborhood and was interested in, the changes to the house. I didn't know, it looks like a minor variance, but it is going to be a complete second story with 5 bedrooms. So will it continue to be a single family house, or will it be multiple families there or multiple adults?
Okay, any other questions? We'll certainly pass that on as we go through the process. So I guess you're, yeah, go ahead.
Consideration if it's going to be multiple families or multiple adults, whether parking is going to be an issue.
Okay. All right, good points. Any other points at all, sir?
No, as I didn't get a chance to look at the blueprints earlier, but I did look at them in your introduction, so that was a big help. And yep, no other real concerns other than those.
Okay. Well, look, thanks very much for the comments. What we'll do is we'll call for other public comments and we'll close the public portion and then come back and have these addressed. But thanks for your patience as we worked out the technical stuff. And thanks for the comments.
Righto.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
All right. And I'm going to call one third and final time. Are there any other members of the public who are here this evening to speak to the application for 2 Dale Street? Please raise your virtual hand in Zoom. And I'm seeing none. So I'm going to close the public portion of the meeting and I'm going to come back to the applicant. So Chris, we actually had some comments here. Will there be, is it going to remain a single family home? Can you shed light on that?
It will remain a single dwelling home and it will have the exact same driveway that's there right now. It will protrude a little to the right in regards to fence line and property line. So the entrance of the driveway will remain the same, but there will be a little minor variance or minor change just to the right, just so you can accompany a second car without banging indoors, but it will remain a single dwelling home.
Okay, good. Okay, very good. Thanks for that information. Okay, so I guess now what we'll do is we'll or I'll ask the committee, do you have any questions for the applicant after what you've heard? I'm not seeing any. So I'll come back to the committee and look for a motion. So it's moved by Greg and seconded by Vincent. Any discussion on this? None at all. So all in favor, raise your hand, and that would be unanimously carried. Thanks very much, Chris.
So am I allowed to leave this meeting at this point?
That's it. The night is yours. Thanks for being here.
Fantastic. I can go
Okay.
make the grandkids food. So now I have another question here. Now, do I have to wait a probation period for this to go? Or am I
Sure.
allowed to apply for a building permit right after
Sure.
this meeting tomorrow?
I'll pass that on to Elizabeth and she'll just explain that to you. But yeah,
Fantastic.
Elizabeth, do you
Thank
want to go through that? Which would be beneficial for others as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Perhaps if I could ask Ms. Stamen if she doesn't mind responding to this as she deals with the notices of decision.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair. There is a 20-day appeal period that will apply to this application and any minor variance application. The appeal period in this case ends on June 7th, and Steve will be in contact with you if you have any other questions.
Very good. Thanks for that.
Fantastic. And thank you very much for your time this evening.
Great. Thanks very much, Chris. Okay, so the next application we have is 8B, which is an application for minor variance. And Lindsay, can I have you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is an application for minor variance, file number D13-017-2021 at 4016A Bath Road. Golsa Kir Mohadam will give a presentation on behalf of the city for this application.
Great, thanks very much.
Good evening, everybody. Through you, Mr. Chair. The application is for minor variance for the property as at 4016A Bath Road. Next slide, please. The applicant is proposing to construct an approximately 60 square meter two-level attached deck in the rear yard of the property. The deck will be located on the water side of an existing single detached dwelling. Next slide, please. Variances from zoning bylaw number 76-26 is required to obtain relief from minimum floodplain setback requirement and maximum floodplain and maximum permitted deck area. Next slide, please. The property has an area of 925.89 square meters and is currently developed with a single detached dwelling and a detached accessory structure. The subject property is located on the south side of Bath Road with approximately 5.5 meters of road frontage. The property abuts low-density residential land uses to the west and east and Collins Bay to the south. Next slide, please. The subject property is designated residential and environmental protection area in the official plan. Residential uses are primary form of housing in residential designation, including detached dwellings. The primary use of the subject property is single family dwelling, which is proposed to remain unchanged. Uses within the environmental protection area are limited to those related to open space, conservation, and flood protection, and must be approved in consultation with CRCA. Next slide, please. The proposed deck has been reviewed by CRCA and the applicant has been informed about the required permit. The official plan requires the protection of a 30-meter naturalized buffer along the waterfront, also referred to as ribbon of life. It is intended to provide a buffer of undisturbed soil and vegetation along the shoreline, which will help to filter runoff, prevent soil erosion, and provide wildlife habitat. Next slide, please. There is currently an existing sunroom that extends towards the water. Proposed deck will extend the same depth as the sunroom and will encroach no closer towards the floodplain than existing development. There is adequate access to the footings between the deck and floodplain. Since the proposed deck is elevated high off the ground, there is little risk to the dwelling and its occupants in the event of flooding beyond the regulatory level. Next slide, please. The property is an existing undersized development lot. It is not feasible for a new deck at this location to be greater than 30 meters from the water, since there is existing development within the buffer at present. The proposed rear yard deck is in keeping with the waterfront nature of the surrounding residential development, where several properties have attached decks on the water side of the dwellings. The site layout provides for adequate amenity and landscape area. Next slide, please. The proposal meets the intent of the official plan, as the proposed floodplain setback and deck area to facilitate the construction of a deck will not result in any negative impacts to adjacent properties or the neighborhood. Next slide, please. The subject property is zoned residential type 1 zone, R1, in the City of Kingston zoning bylaw number 76-26. The R1 zone permits a single-family dwelling house. The proposed variances meet the intent of zoning bylaw and floodplain setbacks to prevent natural hazards, flooding and erosion associated with Lake Ontario, and protection of the water quality and ecological integrity of the lake and shoreline. A slope and erosion assessment confirmed that the deck would be outside both the stable slope and an acceptable toe erosion allowance. Next slide, please. The intent of regulating the maximum size of the deck is to ensure that the property is not overloaded, overdeveloped with raised deck areas that may impact the enjoyment of neighboring properties. While the application proposes a deck that is larger than the regulated maximum in the zoning bylaw, the overall intent of zoning is maintained. The deck is in keeping with the size and scale of the dwelling. It is well buffered from the neighboring properties through natural vegetation, and there are no anticipated negative off-site impacts. Next slide, please. The variances are appropriate and desirable development, as they will allow for construction of a deck in the rear yard and provides for more desirable use of the amenity areas in the yard. The variances from the minimum setback from the floodplain and maximum deck area are considered a minor change to the existing development, and to date, no written or oral submission have been received relating to the application. Therefore, the approval of the subject application is recommended to the Committee of Adjustment, subject to the conditions outlined in the report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thanks very much, Golsa. So at this point, I'd like to call on the applicant or their agent to identify yourself by name and record for the name and address for the record, please.
My name is James Somerville. I live at 4016A Bath Road in Kingston with my wife and occasionally when my children turn up.
Okay. Is there anything further you wanted to add to the application we have this evening?
That was perfect.
Not. Okay, very good. So at this point, I'd like to call on the committee. Do you have any questions for the applicant this evening? None? No, I have none either. It was very straightforward. So I'll now open up the public portion of the meeting. Are there any members of the public with us this evening who wish to speak to the application for 4016A Bath Road? Please raise your virtual hand in Zoom. Are there any members of the public with us this evening who wish to speak to the application for 4016A Bath Road? Please raise your virtual hand. I'm seeing one attendee in the participant. It's Maggie Somerville. But are there any members of the public here who wish to speak to the application for 4016A Bath Road? Please raise your virtual hand. And I'm seeing none. So I'll close the public portion of the meeting and we'll come back to the committee for a motion. So moved by Greg. So we have a motion on the table and seconded by Vincent. Any discussion on this? So all in favor, raise your hand, and that would be carried. Thanks very much, Mr. Somerville.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is item number 8C, which is an application for minor variance. So Lindsay, can I have you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is an application for minor variance at 198-200 Princess Street and 20 Montreal Street. The file number is D13-014-2021. Sarah Oldenburger is the planner assigned to this application.
Very good. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay, Mr. Chair?
Yes, very well. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. So my name is Sarah Oldenburger. I'm a planner with the City of Kingston. And this is a minor variance application for 198 200 Princess Street and 20 Montreal Street. Next slide, please. All right, so the purpose and effect of this application is to convert an existing commercial space on the second story into a residential unit with 2 bedrooms, with a reduction for the required vehicles parking space and a reduction for the 1 bicycle parking space that is required. Next slide, please. So this is the key map showing the subject property. It's worth noting that the portion of the subject property that we are looking at tonight will be at the 20 Montreal Street, which is just a little bit on the lower end of the property. All right, and it's located by the intersection of Montreal and Princess Street, right in the downtown area of Kingston. Next slide, please. So the requested variances that we are asking for tonight are reduction to the residential parking ratios. So there's 1 parking space required for the 1 proposed residential unit, and the variance requested is for 1 of those. So all of the parking spaces to be varied, and also for 1 bicycle parking space to be varied as well. Next slide, please. Here's the site plan provided by the applicant. So as you can see, there's the residential unit will be on the 2nd floor, and it'll be accessed through the front entrance of 20 Montreal Street. So it'll have its own entrance, and we'll go up through a private entrance, which goes up through a stairway to the proposed 2nd residential unit. It's got the 2 bedrooms there and a bathroom, and 2 bathrooms actually. I'm going to see what else. All right, I think that should be good. Next slide, please. You can see a zoom in here on the floor plan. So you can see the dimensions, as well as there are some new openings proposed for the residential unit. So there's a window on one of the bedrooms there, 2 new windows on the front, and then 2 Juliet style doors with Juliet style balconies there as well. Next slide, please. And here's a floor plan just for the first story, or the first floor. So going in through the front and then up through the stairs. Next slide, please. And as you can see, this is the front of the subject property at 20 Montreal Street. As you can see, the awning would be removed to make space for the new proposed openings. So the door there, the 2 windows, the Juliet style balconies, and then the 1 window around the back. Next slide, please. And again, here's a quick overview of the east, west, and south elevations. Also worth noting here, the existing air conditioner unit is being proposed to be moved to the roof, as it is currently projecting off the property boundary. Next slide, please. All right, so I haven't received any comments regarding the application. I received 1 phone call from somebody, and I returned their phone call twice, but I haven't heard back from them. And so that's it for that. Next slide, please. All right, so it's requested that the variances requested maintain the general intent and purpose of both the City of Kingston official plan and zoning bylaw number 96259. It's desirable and appropriate development for the land and the structure, and as such, and it's also considered minor. As such, the proposed application meets all 4 tests under subsection 45(1) of the Planning Act and is being recommended for approval, subject to the proposed conditions. So approval of this will permit the creation of 1 residential unit with 2 bedrooms, with a reduction for the required 1 vehicle parking space and a reduction for the required 1 bicycle parking space. It's worth noting as well that all of the development will happen within the current extent of the building. So nothing is being proposed to be added on and it bigger, like to make it bigger. And the building also covers about 100% of the subject property, which is why this variance is being requested. Thank you so much. I also believe the agent that is, or the applicant that has been bringing this application forward is here tonight to help answer any questions as well.
Very good. Thanks very much for that. Well, on that note, then, can I please ask the agent and or the applicant to identify themselves by name and address for the record, please? Oh, Mr. Gervin, I think you're muted there. Welcome to the club.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
My name is Matt Gervin. I'm the agent for the owner. I live at 256 Mowat Avenue, Kingston, Ontario, K7M1K9. I don't have a lot to add, really. I'm certainly open to questions. I mean, I think this is a very good use of the space. You know, it certainly works with the provincial and the city intensification guidelines. There just is no place for parking or bicycles because the whole building fills the lot entirely. But the owner certainly planned doing a very good quality job in these apartments, and he's putting a couple of French balconies in. They're going to be flush with the walls, so they don't stick out front. So it's going to be, you know, a very good quality done property, and he's going to gut it out and insulate the whole place. And so I think it's certainly a good use of the building in this case. But I'm open to questions.
Great. Thanks very much for that. So on that note, committee members, do you have any questions for the agent, Mr. Gervin? No, I see two heads shaking no, and I don't have any questions. I found it read very well. So I'll open the public portion of the meeting. Are there any members of the public with us this evening who wish to speak to the application for 200 198 Princess Street, 20 Montreal Street? Please raise your virtual hand in Zoom. So I'm not seeing anybody in the attendee gallery. I'll call one more time. Are there any members of the public here to speak to the application for 198, 200 Princess Street and 20 Montreal Street? Please raise your virtual hand. And I'm seeing none. So I'll close the public portion of the meeting and come back to the committee for a motion. So moved by Greg and seconded by Vincent. Any discussion? So all in favor, raise your hands. And that's unanimously carried. Thanks, Mr. Gervin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and committee.
Thanks,
Thank you
Sarah.
very much.
Okay, so next item is number 8D, which is an application for minor variance. So Lindsay, can I have you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair. This is an application for minor variance at 1399 Swallowdale Court. The file number is D13016-2021, and the planner assigned to this application is Phil Prell.
Great, thanks very much.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, and the rest of the
Good evening.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So this is an application for minor variance at 1399 Swallowdale Court. Next slide, please. So the proposal here, the purpose and effect of it is to request a shed and gazebo to be built on the property. And it's going to be built approximately 7.5 feet and 11.9 feet respectively from the exterior side lot line. And where all buildings are supposed to be, buildings and structures are supposed to be set back 20 feet from the exterior lot line. So this requires a variance for the shed of 12.5 feet and a variance for the gazebo by 8.1 feet. Next slide, please. So in a minor variance, of course, we have the 4 tests here. The test, of course, being the general intent and purpose of the official plan is maintained. In this case, the land use compatibility is assessed, and we'll be discussing that a little bit later. The general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw is maintained, which the exterior side yard purpose is discussed in detail in the report, if you'd like to take a look. And the impacts to the urban design and safety, which are considered negligible, which will be assessed a little bit later in this presentation. The variance is considered minor in nature, as in the effects are not negligible, and other aspects comply with the zoning bylaw, and the variance is desirable for the appropriate development or use of land. And of course, the +1 there is that it has to be consistent with the provincial policy statement, but this is site specific, and since no major policies are being impacted here, it is considered to be deemed to comply. Next slide, please. So looking from the top to the bottom, this is kind of a macro to slowly getting closer in view of the property itself. So it is located in a recently built out subdivision. So it's located just south of Catwoods Drive, and it's located within a cul-de-sac on a corner lot, as you can see there in number 3. Next slide, please. So these are the two plans here that are probably going to provide the best visual representation of what this application is really about. As you can see in those two purple circles there, those are the two buildings that are requesting relief from the zoning bylaw. And they are placed there due to the vision for the property, including a pool to the north, which is why these two features had to be placed further to the south. So when looking at the building here, as you can see in the red square, the existing principal building is already 3.6 meters away from the exterior lot line, and it could legally build up to 2.4 meters from the exterior lot line. In this case, the principal building placement has an impact on the streetscape already, and so these two other buildings that would be near the building in place or that is equidistant would not as much of an impact as might first be anticipated. The gazebo is proposed to be equidistant, and the shed is supposed to be about 1.3 meters closer than the gazebo. The perceived impact would be low, and it's logically placed due to the placement of the pool that would be associated with the shed and gazebo on the property here. And then, of course, all of these impacts are going to be further mitigated by the construction of a 2.1 meter or 7-foot fence, which we will have a picture of in just a moment. Before we continue, though, we want to consider what potential safety considerations could be involved here too. So these structures, the gazebo and the building, the shed, are not within a site triangle, so there shouldn't be any complications regarding distractions for drivers who are making quick decisions. And the setback for the two structures is considered appropriate, given the placement of the principal building being so close to the exterior lot line already, and because of the 2.1 meter 7-foot privacy fence that the applicant is proposing as well. Next slide, please. So as we can see here on the right, this is the fence I keep referring to here, and it's surrounding that whole exterior side yard of the property. So these 10-foot, this 10-foot gazebo and shed would not really be able to be seen very well from ground level, although it would be able to be seen from the surrounding properties. However, since the height, its distance from the rear lot line and interior side lot line, not the exterior, but interior side lot line, are all zone compliant, that should be a negligible concern as well, because everyone else in the community could build those same distances as well. So as a result, the neighboring property should not be adversely impacted by the location of the shed and gazebo. The fence buffers this very well, and the fence will also create a consistent streetscape, which would mitigate any potential distractions by having the gazebo or shed closer to the side lot line anyways. And to date, I have not received any public correspondence regarding this application at all, positive or negative. And so with this in mind, I'm going to go to the recommendation here. So the recommendation is our standard recommendation in that the proposal has met all 4 tests required under the Planning Act, and it is being recommended for approval. Next slide, please. And these are the pretty standard conditions as well that we've seen in most of our other reports. So with this in mind, I leave this in your hands. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much for that. So at this point, I'd like to call on the applicant or their agent to identify yourself by name and address, please.
Yeah, I'm Dave Mayo. I live at 1399 Swallowdale Court. I think Phil did a great job at describing what we're hoping to accomplish, so I don't have anything to add. Thanks.
Very good. Thanks very much for that. So I'll turn it over to the committee members. Do you have any questions for the applicant this evening? And no questions for the applicant. Okay, so I'll open the public portion of the meeting. So are any members of the public here to speak to the application for 1399 Swallowdale Court? Please raise your virtual hand. And I'll just call one more time because there's nobody in the attendee gallery. Are any members of the public, or does anybody wish to speak to the application for 1399 Swallowdale Court? Please raise your virtual hand. And I'm seeing none. So I'm going to come back to the committee for a motion. So moved by Vincent and seconded by Greg. Any discussion on this? None? Okay, so all in favor, raise your hands. And that's unanimously carried. Thanks very much, Mr. Mayo.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, committee members. Have a great rest of your night.
Thanks, Phil. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is 8E, which is an application for minor variance. And I'll just ask Lindsay to read this into the record, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair. 8E is an application for minor variance at 2812 Battersea Road, file number D13-019-2021. And the planner assigned to this file is Jason Partridge.
Great, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, very well, thank you.
So this is an application at 2812 Battersea Road. It is a minor variance application. Next slide, please. The purpose and effect of the minor variance application is to request relief for the requirements regarding the interior setback to build a 35.4 square meter accessory building within the rear yard of the property. Next slide, please. So type of minor variances is just one, and it's for the interior side yard setback. Next slide, and I'll explain the variances. So can you just jump to the next one? So as you can see, the red line represents the split zoning of the property. So in the front, it is R1, and in the back, it's A1. So technically, within the side yard of the building, they could build this accessory building. However, due to our zoning bylaws, it is split, and it is an A1 setback in the back, which requires a 12-meter setback. Next slide, please. So here's the elevations. It's well within the height, and everything will be locked down for this type of application through the notice of decision. Next slide, please. So recommendation, the requested variances are in the general intent and purpose of the City of Kingston official plan and zoning bylaw for 7626. The proposal is desirable and appropriate development for the use of land, building, or structures, and the requested variances are minor in nature. As such, the proposed application meets all four tests under subsection 45(1) of the Planning Act, and the application is being recommended for approval. Approval of this application will allow for the construction of the new accessory building within the rear yard of the property. Any questions?
Not right now. Thanks very much, Jason.
Thank you.
So at this point, I'd like to call on the applicant or their agent to identify themselves by name and address, please.
Hi there. My name is Matt Cooper. I live at 2812 Battersea Road, Inverary. Yeah, Jason pretty much nailed it.
Okay, all right. So I'll turn to the committee members and ask, committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant? No, I have no questions either. It was very well explained. Thanks for that, Jason. Report was well written. So I'll now open the public portion of the meeting. Are any members of the public with us this evening who wish to speak to the application for 2812 Battersea Road? Please raise your virtual hand. And as before, there's nobody in the attendee gallery, so I'll call one more time. Does anybody here wish to speak to the application for 2812 Battersea Road? Please raise your virtual hand in Zoom, and I'm seeing none. So I'm going to come back to the committee for a motion. Moved by Vincent, seconded by Greg. Any discussion? None at all. So all in favor, raise your hand. And that's unanimously carried. Thanks very much.
Very good. Thank you all.
Yep. Okay, the next application we have this evening is number 8F, which is an application for minor variance. And Lindsay, can I have you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Up next is an application for minor variance, file number D13-021-2021 for 1613 Brookdale Avenue. The city planner for this file is also Jason Partridge.
Great, thank you.
So through you, Mr. Chair, this is a minor variance application at 1613 Brookdale Avenue. Next slide, please. The purpose and effect of this minor variance application is to request relief from the requirements regarding the minimum setback from the rear lot line and maximum area for decks 1.2 meters above grade to build a 13.8 square meter rear yard deck within the rear yard of the property. The property also has an existing deck at 25 square meters within the rear yard. Next slide, please. So there's two variances that are being applied for is the minimum setback from rear lot line, which is set at 4 meters, and the proposal is 3.4, and the requested variance is 0.6, and the maximum area above 1.2 meters. So this is every single deck measured in the lot area, and it's over 8.8 square meters. And then we just, next slide, I can show you the picture. So this is in the Brookdale Avenue area. So it's in the Westbrook Meadow area. Next slide, please. So you can see right there. So new deck right there. And then the existing deck is to the left of that. So applying for maximum lot area and the rear lot setback. Next slide, please. So the requested variances are in the general intent of the official plan and zoning bylaws 7626. The proposal is desirable for the appropriate development, use of land, building, or structures. The requested variances are minor in nature. As such, the proposed application meets all 4 tests under the subsection 45(1) of the Planning Act, and the application is being recommended for approval subject to the proposed conditions. Approval of the application will allow for the construction of a new deck within the rear yard of the property. That's it. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. So I'd like to call on the applicant or their agent to identify yourself by name and address, please.
So I'll speak on it. He was having some difficulty jumping on. I do see him. It's Joe. Are you there, Joe?
Yep, he just has to unmute his mic.
There we go.
There we go. Hi, I can hear you, Joe.
Hi, my name is Joe Di Pietrantonio. I reside at 865 Windermere Drive in Kingston, and I'm the applicant for my son, who resides at 1613 Brookdale Ave. So Jason outlined everything that we've requested as far as a variance. I'll leave it with you guys.
Okay, thanks very much. So committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant's representative? And none, and I have no questions. It was very, very straightforward. So I'll open the public portion of the meeting. Are any members of the public here this evening to speak to the application for 1613 Brookdale Avenue? Please raise your virtual hand. Again, nobody's in the public gallery, so I'll call one and final time. Is anybody here this evening to speak to the application for 1613 Brookdale Avenue? Please raise your virtual hand. And I'm seeing none, so I'll turn it back over to the committee for a motion. So it's moved by Vincent and seconded by Greg. Any discussion on this? So all in favor, raise your physical hand, and that's unanimously carried. Great. Thanks, Joel.
Great. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, you too. Okay, the next application is number 8G, which is application for permission. And Lindsay, can I have you introduce this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, 8G is an application for permission, file number D13-027-2021 for 585 Union Street. James Barr will give the presentation for this application.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone. This is a permission application for the property located at 585 Union Street. The purpose and effect of this application is to allow for the expansion of existing non-compliant building with a 2nd-story rear addition over an existing 1st-story rear addition. Next slide, please. The lands are located on the north side of Union Street, just east of Yonge Street in the Portsmouth Village neighborhood. The existing building contains 2 residential units. It is zoned A5 in zoning bylaw 8499 and designated residential in the official plan. Next slide, please. As it is a non-complying structure, if you could see from the previous slide, the house was built quite close to the front lot line and to the east lot line. And zoning bylaw 8499 does not contain a zone provision that allows for the expansion of a non-complying structure as of right. So because this building is deficient in its front yard setback and interior side yard setback, the permission application was required to consider this change. Next slide, please. This is a representation of that site plan. So you can see the existing building in the front here, located in the middle of the image. It is quite close to the front lot line and to the east side lot line, which are those two metrics that I just described. Next slide, please. This gives you an idea about the second story expansion that they're proposing. So on the left-hand side is the existing house as it is today, with the second story concentrated to the front of the building, with the rear additions in the back only being the first story. So right now we're looking at the second story. On the right-hand side is the second floor at the expansion. So you can see it will be over the existing first story that exists there today. Next slide, please. Notice was given in accordance with the city's policies and the Planning Act. Since advertising this application, we haven't received any formal written correspondence as well as any phone calls. So we have not received any correspondence to date on this application. Next slide, please. Approval of this application would allow for the second story addition to be constructed. Our review of the application has determined that it is in accordance with the two tests of the Planning Act for a permission application. It meets both of those. So it is similar to the use that exists today, and it is an appropriate and desirable use of the land. So staff have recommended approval of the application here tonight, subject to the conditions contained within the exhibits. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Great. Thanks very much for that, James. All right. So I'd like to call on the applicant or their agent to identify yourself by name and address, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. My name is Mike Keene, and I'm a land use planner with O10 Consultants, and we're located at 4 Cataraqui Street, Suite 315 in Kingston. And I'm here on behalf of the owner, Rory Dick, who's filed this application. And I have nothing further to add to James' presentation, but if questions arise, I'm happy to assist James with any responses. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much for that. So committee members, do you have any questions for Mr. Keene or the applicant? And I'm seeing two shaking heads, and I have no questions either. So at this point, I'll open the public portion of the meeting. Are any members of the public with us this evening who wish to speak to the application for 585 Union Street? Please raise your hand. And again, there's nobody in the public gallery, so I'll ask one last and final time. Is anybody here this evening to speak to the application for 585 Union Street? Please raise your virtual hand. And I'm seeing none, so I'll turn it back to the committee for a motion. So moved by Greg and seconded by Vincent. Any discussion on this application? None? Okay, so all in favor, raise your hand. And that's unanimously carried. Thanks, Mr. Keene. And thanks, James.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Yeah, you too. All right, the next application is 8H, which is an application for consent. And Lindsay, can I have you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair. These are applications for consent, file numbers D10-002-2021 and D10-003-2021 at 2040 Sydenham Road. Jason Partridge is the planner for these.
Great. Oh, you're muted there, Jason.
There we go. So through you, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
Sydenham Road. The application type is consent. So next slide, please. The purpose and effect of the consent application is to sever off 2 parcels of land at the property located at 2040 Sydenham Road. The severance application for D10-002 will sever off a 1.5 hectare parcel of land and have 80 meters of lot frontage along Burbrook Road. The second severance will be for D10-003-2021. Will sever off a 1.68 hectare parcel of land and have approximately 80 meters of lot frontage along Burbrook Road. The retained lot will have 20.12 hectares of land and 520 meters of frontage along Sydenham Road. Next slide, please. So the consent applications are located around the intersection of Burbrook Road and Sydenham Road, just outside of this cluster of houses. Next slide, please. So here is the 2 consents. So 1.5 hectares on the left and 1.68 hectares on the right. And then the retained lot will be just north of that. Next slide, please. The requested consent applications maintain the general intent and purpose of both the City of Kingston official plan and zoning bylaw 7626. The proposal is under section 53(1) of the Planning Act. The two consent applications requested do not require a plan of subdivision and have regard for the provisions of section 5124. The appropriate conditions are included in the conditions of consent as permitted under section 5312. Approval of this application will allow for the creation of 2 parcels of land that will permit the construction of a single-family dwelling on each parcel of land. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much for that. So I'd like to call on the applicant or their agent to identify themselves by name and address, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's Alex Adams here from the Boulevard Group. I'm the agent for the applicant on this, on these 2 consents. These were originally delegated, but they've been bumped up to committee. I've got nothing further to add at this moment from Jason.
Okay, thanks for that. So committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant, agent? None? I just had one comment or just one point of clarification. So the retained portion, which will be the bulk of the lands that will front on Sydenham Road, is there currently an entrance going off of Sydenham Road?
Yes, there's one at the kind of the very north end.
North end, okay. Great. I have no other questions. So I'm going to open the public portion of the meeting. Are there any members of the public here that wish to speak to the application for 2040 Sydenham Road? Please raise your virtual hand. And again, there's nobody in the attendees, but I'll call again. Is there any members of the public here to speak to the application for 2040 Sydenham Road? Please raise your virtual hand in Zoom. And I'm not seeing any, so I'll come back to the committee for a motion. So moved by Greg and seconded by Vincent. And any discussion on this? So all in favor, raise your hand. And that's unanimously carried. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks.
All right, and our next application is number 8I, which is an application for consent. So Lindsay, can I have you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair. 8I is an application to amend the conditions of a consent for 1444 Spruill Street, file number D10-034-2020. Jason Partridge is also the planner for this application.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is a amended conditions consent application for 1444 Spruill Street. Next slide, please. The purpose and effect of this application is to amend the original conditions of the notice of decision for consent application D10-034-2020. 3 conditions will be added to the notice of decision to permit the creation of a new lot at 1444 Spruill Street. Next slide, please. So the 3 conditions that will be added are the reference plan, confirmation of payment of taxes, and the civic address application requirement. Next slide, please. So this is from the original application for D10-034-2020. It's just to create a new lot. The minor variances were passed on the property last meeting as well. So the notice of decision was missing 3 conditions, and that's the point of this additional application. Next slide. Approval of amended conditions by the Committee of Adjustment will provide the City of Kingston confirmation that all taxes have been paid, proper civic addresses on the property, and a copy of the reference plan. All conditions must be fulfilled prior to the finalization of the lot creation through the issue of certificate of official by the municipality. No other changes are proposed through this report. There is no anticipated impact on adjacent properties or any policy or regulations through the request to amend these conditions of approval. It is recommended that the Committee of Adjustment grant this approval to amend the conditions of consent of approval. Thank you.
Great, thanks for that. So at this point, I'd like to call on the applicant or their agent to identify yourself by name and address, please? Good.
Hi, yep. This is Mark Willitson. I'm the applicant, and I believe Jason described everything that needed to be said there.
Good. Okay, so committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant or for staff? No, none at all. I don't have any questions, so I will open up the public portion of the meeting. Are any members of the public with us this evening who wish to speak to the application for 1444 Spruill Street? Please raise your virtual hand. And I'll call one final time. Are any members of the public with us this evening who wish to speak to the application for 1444 Spruill Street? Please raise your virtual hand. And I'm seeing none. So I'll come back to the committee for a motion. So moved by Greg and seconded by Vincent. Any discussion on this? None at all. So all in favor, raise your hands. And that's unanimously carried. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, you.
Jason. And our last application this evening is number 8J, which is an application for consent. So Lindsay, can I have you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, our last application tonight is to amend the conditions of a consent at 3028 Princess Street and 956 Woodhaven Drive, file number D10-007-2021. I'm the planner assigned to this application.
Good. Oh.
Okay, so this is an application to amend 3 conditions of a provisionally approved consent. The file number for that consent was D10-048-2019. The purpose is so that the applicant has the option of retaining the existing single-family home on the Princess Street lot. Next slide, please. The application was provisionally approved at the Committee of Adjustment meeting on June 22nd, 2020. That application was for the transfer of the rear portion of the 3028 Princess Street property to the Woodhaven Drive property. That portion is shown with the diagonal lines on this drawing. The conditions of the original notice of decision required the demolition of all structures on the Princess Street property. The applicant has now applied to change 3 conditions of that notice to create the option of retaining the single-family dwelling. That's been marked in yellow on this plan. In order to retain the house, it must be connected to city sewer lines, which it is not connected now. It cannot remain on the private septic system. So the proposed new conditions reflect this requirement. No other changes to the original consent are proposed. The transferred portion will be the same size, and all structures aside from the house will be demolished. The existing private septic system still must be decommissioned and removed. Next slide, please. This table shows the 3 conditions that would be changed through this application. I put the original condition on the left side and the proposed amended condition on the right. And I've just highlighted the affected text as most of the condition is the same on the original and the proposed new notice. The full list of the original conditions is available in Exhibit B of the report, and the full list of the new conditions can be found in Exhibit G. So condition 6 would be amended to only require the demolition of the single-family dwelling if it is not serviced by city sewer. The house would be permitted to remain if serviced, and it's worth noting that the existing house complies with all zoning requirements like setbacks and height and things like that. Condition 8 would be amended to require the existing home, if retained, to be connected to the municipal sewer services. And then changes to condition 9 are also proposed. This is really just a housekeeping matter because the approval authority for septic systems has transferred to the city's building services division instead of the KFL&A public health unit. Next slide, please. It is recommended that the Committee of Adjustment grant this approval to amend the conditions of the consent. I leave this in your hands, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thanks very much for that. So at this point, can I call on the applicant or their agent to identify themselves by name and address, please?
Good evening. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, very well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Yuko Leclerc. I'm a land use planner with FO10 Planning and Design. Our office is located at 4 Cataraqui Street, Suite 315. I have read the staff report from Lindsay, from Planner Stamen, and obviously watched the presentation this evening, and I have no comments and no concerns, and I agree with the recommendation. And I'm here if there's any questions.
Okay, thanks very much for that. So committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant, the staff? I have one question, actually. Lindsay, it was interesting. You just made a comment that the septic approvals have been moved from a KFLA to city, I guess, building department. Is that going to be the way it is moving forward now?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
It is, okay.
All septic system approvals will be done through the building services department.
Building services. Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, so I don't have any other questions, so I'll open the public portion of the meeting. Are any members of the public here to speak to the application for 3028 Princess Street? Please raise your virtual hand in Zoom. Again, nobody's in the public forum, so I'll call one final time. Does anybody wish to speak to the application for 3028 Princess Street? Please raise your virtual hand. And I'm seeing nobody, so I'll come back to the committee for a motion. So moved by Vincent, seconded by Greg. Any discussion? So all in favor, raise your, a discussion point, Greg? Yep.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to ask city staff if they've heard anything from the one letter from the person that wrote the one letter back in January of last year, if they've heard anything from them since that letter was submitted. Thank you.
Thanks.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Public notice is not required for an application to amend the conditions of a consent. As such, we have heard nothing from that neighbor. However, the new notice of decision, if approved at this meeting, will be circulated in accordance with the Planning Act, and that neighbor will be provided with the notice of the decision with an opportunity to appeal.
Got it. Okay, good. Any other questions for the applicant or staff? None? Okay, so we have, I guess, a motion moved by Vincent, seconded by Greg. All in favor, raise your hands. And that's unanimously carried. All right, thanks very much.
Thank you. Enjoy your evening.
Yes, you too. Okay, so back to our agenda. Where are we at here now? So there are no motions this evening and no notices of motions. And any other business, any items you guys want to bring up? Nothing at all at this point. There is no correspondence. The date of the next meeting is Monday, June the 21st. So at this point, we have I need a motion to adjourn. So it's moved by Greg and seconded by Vincent. And any discussion? So all in favor, raise your hands. And that's unanimously carried. Meeting adjourned at 6:44 p.m. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next month.